Hello everyone, and special welcome to our ministers and our distinguished guests this afternoon. And welcome to this panel on how to make better use of our existing infrastructure. My name is Ilse Velvinsdotter. I'm a journalist and moderator from Sweden, where I have done a lot of conferences on infrastructure. And there's translation in 4 different languages available. You find the channels on the signposts next to us and on the screen as well. As you all might know, the life patterns of the modern citizen has changed and become more complex, both in our working and in our social lives, and we are using the transport systems even more than before. And in 2050, we're expected to be 9 billion people on this planet, 2.7 billion additional people living in the cities that we already have today, all with the need to move around. If we look at congestion, it's already costing around $100 billion in the US, and here in Europe the price tag is over 200 billion euros. But congestion is not the only problem. In many countries today we also face problems with pollution, reliability, availability, and to get from point A to point B can be much more tricky than it's supposed to be, and with unpredictable travel times as well. So often we hear this cry out for more infrastructure, but many of us lack the funds. Building new infrastructure is time-consuming, and as cities become more and more dense, it will become politically more difficult as well, because there's no space where we can build it. So we really need smarter and more efficient ways to use our already existing infrastructure. So what is the main problem today? Is it congestion? Is it accessibility? Lack of information, or reliability? We hope this panel will answer some of these questions, as well as inspire you with some new ways of thinking and some new innovations also that might come in handy. So we have divided this hour and a half into 4 different sections. First, you will hear from our speakers entering the stage in 2 and 2, and at the end we'll gather them all on stage for a final discussion, and then we'll also open up the questions from the audience. So first, let's welcome the first 2 representing the political and regulatory side of things, Mr. Patrick McLaughlin, who is Secretary of State for Transport in the UK, and Mr. Salchow Montero, who is Secretary of State for Infrastructure, Transport and Communications in Portugal. Welcome. So, if we begin with you and the UK, you've had a very rapid development in amount of passengers on the railways, and the cars, etc. Did it take you by surprise?
I was made a junior minister in the Department of Transport 25 years ago by Margaret Thatcher, and it's true to say in those days nobody really cared too much about the railways in the United Kingdom. We privatised the train operators, not the infrastructure, and what we've seen has been quite remarkable, because train growth, passenger growth on our railways has doubled in the last 20 years, going from 750 million passenger journeys to 1.5 billion passenger journeys. And when the Prime Minister appointed me Secretary of State for Transport 18 months ago, what struck me was wherever I go now, the call is for better services, more services, and the one thing that is preventing us from giving more services is capacity. And that's one of the reasons why we've taken the decision in the United Kingdom to build a brand new railway line, HS2, which was approved just a few weeks ago by the House of Commons with a huge majority. It is controversial, because any big piece of new infrastructure will put some people against you, because they don't like the disruption that is going to be caused while it's being built. But what we always find is when you build new infrastructure, it may be difficult in the construction period, in the planning period, in getting that right. But actually once it's there, people are usually saying, gosh, why wasn't this built years ago? So we're investing massively in infrastructure investment at the moment in the United Kingdom, not just on HS2, but also on the existing railways. So that comes back to what you were saying a little earlier on, about making the most of the existing capacity you've already got. So electrifying over 800 miles, doing new bits of infrastructure to improve the reliability of the existing train operating areas. Taken with that, what we're also doing on the road. So I don't think you can look at any one area for transport infrastructure. You've got to look at how you do it across the piece. So we're also doing quite a bit as far as making better use and more effective use from our roads, using our motorways more smart motorways, so that we can actually monitor the flow and improve the flow by sometimes slowing it down. We can actually get a greater throughput and making use of what was the hard shoulder and actually making that now an all-running lane as well. So that is making use of the existing infrastructure, but also looking to invest longer term in our infrastructure across the piece.
But you also stepped up the maintenance, right?
Yes, well, we're doing that now. We are Network Rail, which is our rail, operates our infrastructure for the railways. They are getting £38 billion over the next 5 years, and we're about to do the same for the road industry, for the roads as well, the strategic roads, the roads which are actually monitored and run by the government, as opposed to the local roads which are done by the local authorities.
Yeah, and you changed the way decisions are made, I know, allowing local people to make more decisions than before. Why did you do that?
Well, because there is, so long as we're talking about the local section of what the local authority does, then you've got to involve local people. You've got to give them the opportunity. You've got to show that you're taking into account what they're saying to you. Not always will you be able to take their concerns away, but at least you go to the extra effort to do that.
And if we turn to you, Mr. Sergio Montero, I know in Portugal you've done a lot of work and a lot of analysis to come up with a strategic plan for the years to come up until the year 2020. You made something called PT +3, yes, and it's like 53 projects, and it's 6 billion euros in investment. You're going to finance it with the EU grants and private sector also, and some public funding. Do you think all these investments will happen? Because it sounds like a lot to me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me in the panel. First, I would like to say that we started prior to approved the strategic plan that we have now in place, started with a real diagnosis. Because I think to take better use of existing infrastructure, you need to listen to the actors first and decide after. Political decision makers have the ultimate say, of course, and we have approved it in the Council of Ministers, but we need to have informed decisions. And we hear all economic sectors, as well as public bodies that are responsible to develop those infrastructures together with regulators. We have changed the framework law for regulation to improve their financial capacity and also the independence vis-à-vis governments. So we have started by setting up a diagnosis, and we have came to I would say, a consensual conclusion in Portugal. We need to take better advantage of existing infrastructure by removing bottlenecks and improving efficiency of the use. Two examples. First one, on the rail. We have the electrification of our rail network is relatively reduced in European terms. So part of this investment using cohesion funds, because unfortunately we are trying very much to get ahead of ourselves, but unfortunately we are still a cohesion country. We need to continue to converge to EU level. So we are using cohesion funds for rail investment. Otherwise it will be impossible, because rail does not generate sufficient cash flow to pay for itself. So, and we are using that money to electrify and to reduce bottlenecks by reducing the angle of curve and the angle of pendant, so that trains of 750 meters for freight movement can move there. So we increase the scale in order to reduce the cost, the unitary cost. So we are trying to increase efficiency on the rail freight movement of our exporters, because we want to be an export-driven economy. Second thing that we did, we have created a model, a software that is embedded on a vision regarding infrastructure that tries to have intermodality as the decision-making process. When we invest in a certain piece of infrastructure, we look at all other pieces that are connected. We are trying to develop our port sector, and part of the investment to be rendered by private operators will be in the port sector. We are trying to have new container terminals in the 3 main locations in Portugal, one for transshipment, the other one is for interland and to support our export activity. And we are linking the rail network to the ports. As part of the Trans-European network, using Connecting Europe facility funds, we hope we are putting forward applicancies files to have support of the Connecting Europe facility. So we are taking, we try the most out of the planning, the diagnosis that we have done throughout the years, where Portugal, for obvious reasons that you all know, was not in a position to invest. But we try to get a more rational vision out of investment. Taxpayers' money are a scarce asset that we have in Portugal, because we still have some headwinds in front of us despite ending the assistance program. So we need to be extremely careful the way we invest. That's why we said very clearly, cohesion funds will go for rail. We want to improve our competitiveness. We try to seek with a very stable framework environment for private investors to come into Portugal to feel secure and that the IRR for their investment is positive. We are trying to seek private monies into the port system more than we have right now, and we are trying to combine all modes of transport in an intermodal solution. We have already, for some years, the port single window, in which we have a paperless approach to the port in and out of the freight, and we are trying to enlarge it to a logistics single window, and we are exporting that capacity so that we have an intermodal logistic approach to existing infrastructure.
So what do you think is the main problem in your infrastructure today? Is it the intermodality and that work that you need to do in that sector?
We have perhaps the mix of investment in recent years was not consistent with what the economy has asked us. We have invested a lot through PPPs based on availability payments. We have invested a lot on roads, but unfortunately the road usage has reduced because of the crisis, because they are real toll roads in part of the country, and we needed to put tolls on former availability payment roads. So highways have reduced usage, so we need to continue to invest in other modes of transport. So the mix between rail and road needs to be much more balanced in benefit of rail investment instead of road investment as it was for the last 20 years. So we have invested a lot of money, public money, into roads, but the economic benefit out of that investment was not real. As you may be aware, the growth rates of Portugal in the last 15 years were less than 1% per annum. So we put a lot of money in infrastructure, but we did not get benefit for citizens and for the economy out of that investment. That's why we have started with a diagnosis, a real feel of the economic needs and the bottlenecks on existing infrastructure, and we are talking a 6 billion euro plan based mainly on EU funds for 8 years. Because the period for investment is between 2014 and 2022, accompanying the EU funding period. So it's not a lot of money for 8 years, it's less than 1 billion euros per annum. When I hear 38 billion pounds for just a single part of the infrastructure, I feel a little bit envy, I have to say. But we need to be extremely rational in Portugal, and we want to deliver the best environment, and there we are doing a lot of effort for private investors to come in, to feel secure, and to invest on behalf of the state.
But you're also going to review the legal framework. Why are you doing that? What is needed there?
We are reinforcing the powers of the regulatory entities, since we are privatizing part of significant portions of infrastructure. For instance, Vinci Concession, which will be part of the panel a little bit later on, won the privatization of our airport network in Portugal. So it's a natural monopoly being now held by a private entity. We need to reinforce the powers of the regulator, the skills, the independence, So we are doing a lot there. We are liberalizing the market in terms of transport. Rail freight, we are trying to liberalize even more. Rail passenger will be further liberalized until 2019 according to EU directives. So we are doing a lot of effort to continue to open the economy. But we need to make sure that our public bodies independent, that will render their role, which means that they will secure that the common goal of having better infrastructure at the balanced risk and price is achieved.
So you're both ministers, you both work with regulations and such. What do you think about the role of regulations when it comes to creating a better use of the infrastructure that we're talking about?
Well, I think the regulator can do many things. It can reassure the user, but it can also reassure the markets that there is going to be a fair return for investment where you've got private sector investment, and there is always going to be this balance between ensuring that those people who invest in one's country gets a fair return, bearing in mind the travelling passenger or the user, be they airport user, be they road user, and we're going to expand, we're going to bring in a role for the road regulatory body which currently doesn't exist. There is one there for rail, there is one there for the CAA as far as aviation is concerned, and we will be taking a piece of legislation through the House of Commons shortly, hopefully, which will give much more of a road regulator as well.
And what do you think?
Exactly the same. One of the most relevant things that government should deliver to the market is predictability. We need to have stable plans and not plans dependent on political cycles.
But this can be difficult, yes?
It is extremely difficult, easier said than done. But since I'm not a politician for that long, I'm just 3 years in the office and hoping to be one more only, it's easier for me to say. Meaning that when we have a document, that's why we did it like this in Portugal. We asked the economy to propose, to say what are the bottlenecks, what are the priorities, what are the constraints, and how we should move forward. Because if we have a document for public discussion with the stamp of a government, it's going to be politicized. If we have a document stamped by the economy, it's far more difficult for parties that support governments and opposition to fight against it. So it's easier to get a consensus around the plan. And the best way to secure investment, namely private international investment to a country, is to let them know that we will deliver whatever is approved. Regulation is extremely important because it's also a pillar of this stability, this reliability relationship that states need to have towards investors and towards the community. We as politicians cannot say to a part of the country that they will have this investment if we are not prepared to go, to decide, to pay for it and to deliver it to the community. So we have a responsible speech that we need to continue to have to our citizens and to international community. And I think regulation is a very key part of it.
No, I'd agree there with what Sergio says, because I think there has to be the chance to challenge the regulator. The regulator has to be open in the way in which they've come to their decisions. And if there was a dispute between the regulator, then you could always go to the competitions authority. But usually the industries are more than happy to go along with what the regulator says.
So what do you think is the main problem? I mentioned a lot of things in my introductions, like congestion, accessibility, lack of information, reliability. Is there one problem that's bigger than the others?
No, because I think the other thing that we've got to, sometimes we can, the way you set out the problems we all face, it made me feel like running away and not doing anything.
Oh, that was too bad.
Because that was, you know, you put all those things together and that's what you can do. But actually there is so much more that we can do with technology as well. I think we underplay the role that technology is going to play in the future as far as making the knowledge base available to the passenger. I think this is going to be the next 10 years, how we use smart technology, be they smartphones, be it smart roads, be it smart crossings and the like, to utilize and maximize the availability we've got. And then how do we also How do we also get that balance right, that everybody wants to arrive at work at 9 o'clock in the morning and sort of leave between sort of 4:30 and 6 o'clock in the evening? So that huge pressure on the network in the rush hour and the commuter time, but how do we also then make utilization of all this availability of stock throughout the rest of the traveling times? And there's a huge amount that you can do on price. So you can price in such a way that you get people using, often in the United Kingdom, there's great play made about how expensive train travel is. But if you pre-book your ticket, you know, you can get it a lot cheaper. And I think the whole digital revolution that is going to come in the next 10 years is something perhaps we haven't yet given enough thought to as to how that's going to change the travelling patterns of the public.
Yeah, so you're both into the ITS and working with ITS. I think many countries are, and we will hear more about that later from the other guests in the panel. But there is a huge issue around the ITS, and I'm just curious about your view on that. With all the data and the use of data and a need of change of regulations and stuff to open up this data to the ITS operators, and of course surfaces the security and the privacy issue. How are you thinking about that?
First, one comment prior to the data. I fully agree with Patrick in a sense that you may be aware we had some general strikes throughout this period in Portugal. Not riots, but some strikes. In reality, we do not have general strikes. There are transport strikes because transport is owned still by the state, but the city stops when transport system stops. And we need to realize the importance that transport has in the day-to-day life. That's why we need to deliver. The yield management factor that Patrick was talking about is extremely important for us to get it scientific, more efficient, to try to sort of combine the right decisions by consumers to the right congestion that we have in certain periods of time. So we need to make sure that yield management aligns incentives between the users and the managers of the infrastructure. One of the debates we have right now, not only related to transport, but all other activities that want access to data related to smartphone use and so on, is about data protection.
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult. And the legislation changes from one country to the other. For instance, in Portugal, we have a very restrictive legislation regarding data protection. But I think we need to make sure that public bodies have a closer cooperation with the industry. I think also, at least in Portugal, that's the case definitely. The industry, because it's a small market, is relatively distant to public bodies, to data protection, and even to consumers. We all use smartphones. We all know that there is a certain congestion there based on internet information, based on some of the GPS information that we already have, but we still need to continue to have the industry coming into the country, and that's why we want to bring the industry together with private investment. That's why we cherish and seek so much through the privatization program, and also by securing international best practices in the infrastructure investment to try to bring the industry closer to the country, the users, and to the economic agents.
So what is the discussion around this in the UK at the moment?
Well, I think as Sergio has just said, that if the passenger, the consumer, can see the advantage, then I think the opposition to the use of the data goes away, but obviously there are data protection issues which one has to be aware of, and that will be to continue to be debated. There is no, I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that, but you know, the passenger wants to get a good deal as well, the consumer wants to get a good deal, and they'll adapt to that technology that's available that brings about that deal.
So our time is up for now. Thank you, Patrick McLaughlin, and thank you, Mr. Sergio Montero. So, what can we do to create a better flow so people can get from A to B in a swift and reliable way? In Holland, they began a special program to try and combine different ways of traveling during the peak hours, and also to inspire new ways to think about how to get to work and then how you work. And we're going to see a little film. Yes, here it comes.
Although we're moving in the right direction, a tough problem remains: daily traffic jams. People arrive late at work and a lot of precious time is wasted. But this congestion is neither everywhere nor all the time. It's mainly present during peak hours and at bottlenecks around large cities. This congestion mainly occurs at certain times and in certain places. And that's also where the solution lies. The solution is actually very simple: optimizing the use of roads at the busiest spots in the country and at the busiest times of the day. Because if there are just slightly fewer cars in a tailback, there won't be any traffic jam at all. But fewer cars in peak hours, isn't that an impossible undertaking? Not at all. Minister Schultz van Hagen has launched a special initiative, the Optimizing Use Program. The goal? Improving traffic flows by better utilizing roads, rail and waterways. And through optimizing the use of our road network, by the end of 2014, the Minister wants to see a 20% reduction in traffic congestion in the busiest regions at the busiest times. But she can't achieve this alone. That's why the government is collaborating with the business community and regional authorities. The government and the regions are investing some 1.4 billion euros in the program. A lot of money, but the economic loss caused by traffic congestion costs us a lot more. Why a regional approach? That's simple. Every region has its own specific traffic problems. The bottlenecks in Groningen are very different to those in Rotterdam or Maastricht. Across the country, bottlenecks have been selected in 12 urban areas, and different solutions have been thought up for each of these problems. This comes to more than 280 concrete measures, each of which ensuring fewer cars in peak hours. For example, the construction of new bicycle highways, or more bicycle parking facilities at train stations, as well as improved travel information, agreements on smart working, and e-bikes with staff discounts. No matter how different the regional approaches are, they all have one thing in common. The optimizing use of roads is only possible if people modify their behavior. If we can show people that it's sensible to choose their own path by working from home, for example, or by avoiding traffic congestion for a day by traveling by train or bike. But how do you promote this kind of behavior? Companies can provide flexible working hours or offer the option of working from home. Authorities can build cycle paths and better bike parking facilities. In this way, increasingly more people would travel outside peak hours or leave the car at home now and then. They would see for themselves that it's good to be able to choose your own path. The power of the Optimizing Use program lies in two things: collaboration among all stakeholders, authorities, companies, and employees, and practical solutions rather than theoretical reality on paper. Realistic solutions that are feasible and can be delivered immediately, like reduced travel times and more travel comfort. If we have 1% fewer motorists at the busiest spots during peak hours, it will mean 10% less congestion. That's why we are working together to make optimizing use a success and to make the Netherlands sustainable and accessible.
And now, please welcome Mr. Jan-Bert, who is Program Director for Optimizing Use in the Netherlands, and Mr. Scott Belcher, who is CEO and President of ITS America. So, to begin with you, because we just saw the film, we saw a lot of different solutions that you've been working with. What do you say about the effect of this program so far?
It's always a good question because the movie says a lot. The program has about 350 measures, so it's quite a lot of measures. By the end of the year, they have to be all finished. And if I look at the planning, we will handle 80% of the projects. Till now, 1.5 million travelers avoid the peak hours in the morning. So that's a result.
That's pretty good.
Over the year, it's not every morning, over the year. And that's like a congestion of 40 kilometers.
So when people have changed their behavior like that, do they keep on doing that even if the program goes away?
Partly. We have done some investigations. We've done a project in Arnhem and on several other places in which we give give the people a benefit from 2 to 4 euros, avoiding the peak hours. So we're not charging, but paying. We all understand you cannot do that for all the time, but we've done it as a innovative project. In Arnhem, one of the cities, afterwards 40% of the people stayed in the new behavior. So they need a little push to change the behavior, and then they see the benefits, because you gain time.
Yeah, in Sweden, where I come from, we also discussed this. We just began discussing this. People should not maybe commute so much and maybe work from home and etc. Exactly the same thing. But it's also difficult to change people's behavior. And now you have some results, but I guess that you're aiming for more. And you worked a lot with this collaboration, private companies, regions, and others. How has that been? Is that the way to go if you want to launch a program like this one?
I think so. I'm working with the central government. I don't know the problems in all the cities. The people who live there know the problems. You notice the same thing. And they know how to handle the problems, I think. But you have to make a process with all the partners so you can get some innovations on the projects and think about other solutions than we know as usual, because most public parties start with infrastructure. And it's good. In Holland we also keep on building infrastructure, but we add this program to it.
So businesses, how have they responded?
Every of the region, all the 12 have a steering committee. One of the regional authority, one CEO on behalf of the companies, and the minister. So these 3 people have to manage the program, and the CEO is there on behalf of the companies.
But I mean, have everybody been positive to this project and say, that's interesting, maybe I can let my people work from home, for instance?
That's a process. There are always companies who want to do it. For instance, Vodafone in Maastricht, they got a call center. You can have the call center in the company, but partly the call center is at home. So that's a choice. There's no need to have a call center in the company. You can do it at home. You can monitor on a monitor, literally, what action is at home, so there's no problem.
And part of this work is about the intermodal connections, of getting people to maybe take their bike to the metro instead of the car and so on. So how do we best integrate these systems into a fluent network? Is IT the key here?
I think IT is one of the keys. Absolutely, we have 7 big IT projects in the program. It's one of the things you have to do, absolutely. But you need to do other things as well. For instance, one of the hospitals changed the parking policy, and they gave the personnel a fee when they step over on the bike, 10 cents a kilometer. 700 people changed from car to bike. So that's one way to...
But you had to pay them.
No, I didn't pay them. The hospital paid them.
Yeah, but still,
they introduced parking fees,
needed.
so they get income, and they could compensate.
So the parking fees went to going by bike. Then I understand. Okay, and there's another interesting thing in the Netherlands. Last year, the Dutch Minister of Infrastructure and Environment actually drove on the highway ring around Amsterdam between normal traffic at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour in Davi, which is an automated vehicle, and the Netherlands is expecting the first vehicle of this kind to be available for public use in 2016, so that's not far away. And experiments on a high level with similar cars are conducted in the US, and that's where you come in, because you know a lot about this, Mr. Scott Belcher. You're the CEO of ITS America, so it's an organization for intelligent transportation systems. You work with a lot of different, like 450 public agencies and a lot of other partners as well.
Yes, so ITS America is a public-private organization with half of our members are public operating agencies, state departments of transportation, the United States Department of Transportation Academic Institution, and the others are private companies, many of the companies that are here, IBM, Oracle, Siemens. And so in the connected vehicle world and connected and autonomous vehicle world, there are really 3 ways of viewing connected and autonomous vehicles. The first is connectivity to the cloud. And we've heard a lot in this conference about connectivity to the cloud, bringing data into the vehicle, making the vehicle part of the Internet of Things, giving people access to data, giving people access to different transit options. That's one way. The second part of connected vehicles is something that we're pursuing very vigorously around the world, in North America, in Europe, and in Asia, which are vehicles that communicate with each other to prevent crashes. This is, and this is being done in all three regions. In the United States, we think this technology can reduce non-impaired crash scenarios by 80%.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's bigger than seatbelts. It's bigger than electronic stability control. It's bigger than airbags. And in the United States, we've demonstrated this technology, as we have in other parts of the world, and our Department of Transportation has announced that it's going to require this technology in new vehicles going forward. The third part of connected vehicles, in my mind, is autonomous vehicles. And again, we are seeing different stages of autonomy and different levels of autonomy. Many vehicles you can buy in any country around now have different levels of autonomy already. Electronic braking, lane control, adaptive cruise control. We now see technologies that can park the car. We see technologies that can allow you to cruise on the highway in an autonomous way. In the United States, 8 states have passed legislation that allow companies like Google and Tesla and General Motors and Toyota to test autonomous vehicles on the road. There always has to be a driver that can take control of the vehicle. And so, but what we've seen, and I think the most important thing, is we've seen non-traditional companies come into the market, shake up the traditional companies, and really move this forward. And that's what we're starting to see, at least in the United States, and we'll see greater levels of autonomy coming. I'm not sure when we'll see fully autonomous vehicles. That's a much more difficult question. Maybe not from a technology standpoint, but more from a social standpoint or a policy standpoint.
But the rest that you're talking about, the cars that can avoid crashes, etc., when can we expect that in our daily lives, or is it already here?
Well, you've already got cars that can avoid crashes because of the sensors and the radar and the LiDAR that high-end vehicles have. And those sensors and radar and LiDAR are becoming cheaper, and they're getting into smaller cars. And so we're already seeing that happen. When we talk about vehicles that communicate with each other, in Europe, the Car-to-Car Consortium is going to be deploying this technology by 2015. In Asia, they have vehicle-to-infrastructure technology, which doesn't allow cars to prevent crashes, but gives you information about the infrastructure in your vehicle right now, and it's operational on all of their highways. And in the United States, I think what we've seen, we're going to see this being rolled out over the next 5 to 10 years.
I mean, I'm a little bit curious, these intelligent systems, and you're also using them in the Netherlands. I cannot pronounce this country. Why is that?
Holland.
Holland, yeah, I can say Holland then. Will these systems really be able to battle the problems that we have today with reliability and with the congestion and all the rest?
I think you need them. If you want to make a choice as a passenger, traveler, you need information, you need actual information, so you can make a choice. Late or whatever. So you need the systems as a part of the complete process.
I agree, it's part of a systems approach. I think the vehicles, I think we need to better utilize our existing infrastructure, and we need to figure out how to better utilize the vehicles that we have on the road, whether it's through autonomous, whether it's through shared use, but more importantly, giving consumers better information about their modal choices and giving them real modal choices. And so when it comes to vehicles, we need to look at shared use mobility, ride sharing, car sharing. We need to look at autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, all of that. But that's all part of the transformation that we're going through right now. And we really are at what I think one of the most exciting times in transportation, one of the scariest times, and we should all be scared to death. Many of us won't have jobs because transportation is changing. It's no longer the traditional transportation companies, and it's no longer the slow, methodical pace that we go about when we institute change in automobiles, when we institute change in our infrastructure. That traditional way of doing business is in a collision course with the way that we do business in the technology side. Our risk-reward proposition is different. If you make a mistake, you'll be out of a job. If Eric Mark from IBM makes a mistake, that's good. It's a badge. He's supposed to fail 8 or 9 times a year, or 8 or 9 times. That's a good success rate in the private sector. That's, you know, those risks, but the rewards are so much higher, and the rewards are different. And that's the collision course we see and that we're facing in the transportation world. And that's why it's so exciting, and that's why it's so frightening.
I mentioned before the privacy, the security issue. So how do you feel about that?
From a public perspective, you need to be very careful with privacy, I think. On the other hand, we all know there's all sorts of data, and if you combine 2, 3, or 4 data sources, then you know everything about somebody. So it's difficult, I think, but you need a form of privacy. In our projects, we always ask people, do you want to enjoy this project? So it's a positive choice to act in the project.
And
so that's
how
a way
do
to
you feel
cope. There's a cope the way.
I guess you just want all the data that's out there, right?
I do. I do. I think there's many options with the data. I think data privacy is important. It's a little bit of a red herring, but it's important. Anybody who has a cell phone, anybody who has a credit card has already given it up. Yeah. So you're under an illusion if you think you have privacy and you don't think that people know where you are, you don't think of that. I think you've got to give folks the option to opt out if that's what they want to do. But if you can provide valuable services, that's important. And what we're seeing is really progressive departments of transportation around the world are making their data available public in real time. And that's huge. That's not necessarily a privacy issue as much as it's an economic opportunity to create greater services for the users, and services that as an operator we're not necessarily prepared to do. The private sector can do these new services much more cheaply, much more regularly, and much better than public operators. And that's the opportunity for data for me. So I don't worry so much about data privacy. I think we'll sort it out. And people who are very concerned about it probably will die, and our kids are going to come through. My kids will tell you anything you want to know about them. They don't care about privacy.
They just post it all online already.
They do, exactly. You know, and so I think I think we're going through a demographic change as well. And so I think we'll wrestle with this for the next decade. But I think in another decade we'll wonder why we spent so much time on it.
Do you agree with this?
It's rapidly changing, like you say it, and I think the next generation is facing it in a complete other way. Everything is on the internet, so and they put everything on the internet or on Facebook or whatever.
So if we look at using our existing infrastructure better, is there like one good trick that you have up your sleeve?
In my program, it's about practical solutions. That's one, always practical, and I need to see the cost-benefit relation. And it's all about cooperation, always about cooperation. So you cannot handle the problem in your own, not as a public party. So that's the 2 elements. I
think to use the existing infrastructure better, it's all about data. I mean, I keep coming back to the same thing. But in terms of an operator using data, they can better manage the system. We saw the video, which was a wonderful video. And it's absolutely true. Congestion comes as a result of people stopping and starting. So if you can look at a length of highway over a period of time, historically and in real time, use algorithms, you know where the likely start and stops are. And so you can manage the flow of traffic, the speed of traffic, the vehicles coming on, and all of those things can get you much more capacity on your existing roadway. Making data available for for people so that they can know what their options are in real time. So it's not just about cars. It's about trains. It's about buses. It's about bikes. And that takes people out of their cars. Or it puts more people in one car instead of everybody having a single-use car. So I think that's the future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jan-Bert Dijkstra and Mr. Scott Belcher. You come back later. And the next section of our panel is about some of the technical solutions that are already in use. Welcome Mr. Richard Parod, who is CEO and President of Lindsay Corporation, and Mr. Fadi Selwan, who is Executive Vice President at Vinci Concessions. Now I said technical solutions, and what you do is really a technical solutions. It's something called the road zipper system.
Yes.
What is that?
Well, the road zipper system is a system that consists of, first, basically 1 meter barrier sections linked together with hinge pins, and it's basically a concrete and steel barrier that's moved with a barrier transfer machine to move that barrier as needed in special applications. The applications would consist of things like, it could be a permanent application in terms of creating an HOV or carpool lane. It could be a temporary application in terms of on a bridge or in a special event that's coming up. In fact, it was just recently used at The Hague for the nuclear summit. But it's very often used on bridges to manage the traffic and getting traffic through very efficiently.
So this is helping a lot with one of the problems, congestion. What is it that you do on that bridge? You have the traffic move back and forth in different amount of lanes, so to speak?
Yes, well, often the bridge is a bottleneck for roadways. So if a bridge has 6 lanes, for example, it'll be split 3 and 3. With the road zipper system, they can have 4 or 5 lanes coming into the city in the morning and basically then run it at noon or later in the day and switch it back to 3 and 3. And then at the end of the day, have 4 or 5 lanes coming out of a city. So it allows you to really use the existing infrastructure that's there.
So this costs less than like adding a new lane, which is costly, and you also need space and so on. But I mean, isn't it complicated to have a machine moving a barrier around like several times a day?
Well, it's not that complicated. The machine will basically stay positioned somewhere, either at the end of a bridge or by a tunnel or a roadway. It'll be positioned to be able to handle that. And often there will be more than one machine. They may have a couple machines depending on how long the actual barrier run is. But it's a pretty simple process. The machine will run up to 15 kilometers per hour to move that barrier and can be moving at 7.3 meters at a time. And sometimes they will use it to move the barrier 1 lane or even 2 lanes to change the amount of lanes that are available for traffic. So it's not complicated. And it's basically, in the case of bridges and some other applications, a fractional cost of building another bridge or adding additional lanes.
But when you solve congestion in like one area, don't you just move it, further down the road?
Well, that's really kind of a study that needs to take place before we use the road zipper system, is to really look at where that bottleneck is and what happens if you alleviate the one bottleneck. Is basically, it's not a solution for everything, but in many cases there are bottlenecks that are taking place at bridges or in tunnels or different parts of the roadway, where if you can alleviate that, you basically allow the traffic to flow through. Now, the interesting part in thinking about the data and the things we were talking about earlier, I think this is an important step for the future, because when most of the applications where the barrier system type of application has gone in, or this barrier transfer machine, many of these, and this has been used basically for 30 years in many different parts of the world, they were put in and based on a study that took place at a point in time. Now, if we were to look at real-time data coming in, it could mean that you move that barrier and actually transfer it a couple hours earlier or a couple hours later, but you'll basically be acting to more real-time data.
So, if I turn to you, Mr. Fadi Selwan from Vinci Concessions, your company is called a private partner of public interest. You're Europe's largest operator of transport infrastructure concessions. Your company, you design, you finance, you build, you operate different transport infrastructure and public facilities as well. So what do you think we need to do in the future to sort of optimize the use of our infrastructure, what we already have?
In fact, what I have heard today was that we have solutions when you have an existing asset to try to improve either the information or the traffic to reduce the traffic. In fact, when you have two cities from point A to point B, you have only one way to go, which is the road. The solution that has been described today might be one of the ways, but at the end, if it doesn't work because the traffic is still increasing, you are still stuck with the congestion. You have other systems like the one we are today operating in the US, which is the managing lane system, which is that we are committed on a certain distance of the road to say that if you take this part of the road, we guarantee you this time for the duration of your trip. But every time the traffic increases, the price increases. So you have solutions to avoid congestion. But this, I would say, it's a solution that is more oriented on the price and to force people to pay a higher price in order to have a better travel time. The real issue we have is that some governments have taken some right decision, like in Germany with their A model system, where the government has said, I have some sections that are very jammed. I know that the maintenance of the road has not been well performed, so what I would say, I would go through the private sector, I would ask him to enlarge the road, and I would ask him to maintain it for the 20 or 30 years. This is the way that Germany has looked at the project, and this is the way how the A models are operating today, and we are one of the major players of this road network. And this is one way of improving the congestion, because what you are saying is that you are improving the asset at the highest way possible, but at the end you are also giving to the private sector all the means and all the constraints for him to maintain the asset. Because what we have discovered also around the world is that when the public sector is operating or maintaining a road, from time to time for budget constraints, he has to lower the maintenance of his road because he has a budget constraint, and the money might go on other assets or other expenses he has. Through the PPP scheme, I'm not saying that just for the PPP. It's the fact that you have to be sure on the long term to reduce congestion, that the traffic has to be always very smooth, and that the infrastructure has always to be well maintained. And this is one solution of it. Other solution that have been described earlier was that you have to give the people the choice. And to give them the choice, either you give the choice of train, or the choice of light train, choice of road, but they have to know it before they start the trip. As soon as you start the trip, it's too late. Everybody says we are very happy to go on the road and know that from going from point A to point B, we have improved a lot the information. You know, when you go on a highway, you know that it will take you 16 minutes to go there. But maybe it would have taken you 3 minutes if there was no traffic. This information is important for people not to get angry in the car saying that I'm going to be late. But on the other hand, they will be late and they know it already because they have 16 minutes. So if they knew it before they go, that the option is if you take the metro, it will take you 12 minutes. If you take the train, etc., he will decide it before he decides the choice of the transport he wants to take.
So what do you think? Is there like an option that is better than the others when it comes to like getting better use of what we have already?
I think you have to adapt to the infrastructure and the city or the region you are looking at. Every entity, every project has its own plus and minuses. You have to adapt it. You cannot just say, I have the brightest idea. And one major point that I would like to raise here is that the public sector has always very bright ideas, which is very clear, obvious, but the private sector also has bright ideas. And so the best would be to share the information between both of us, the public and the private sector, like it is done everywhere today through the PPP scheme, because you just exchange ideas. At the end, the public sector is the one who is going to decide, but he would decide based first on his expertise and on the expertise of the private sector, who has seen, like you said, we are a major operator in Europe, so we have seen a lot of policies, a lot of changes in the governments, a lot of changes in the behavior of the people. We can share this with a specific country where they want to look at it. This is one of the ideas, and of course the other idea is to push the public transportation, because I think this is the most logical way of doing it, like metro, like tramways, or like buses. And new ideas like have been done in Paris and in other cities, like the bikes. You can take a bike, or you can take now cars, electrical cars, where you know exactly where you are going to, and you know that when you start your journey from point A, you have already your place already booked for point B.
Mm. So is there any, we talked about policies and regulations and so on, is there any, you're working with a lot of complicated contracts and stuff, so is there anything that you often come across that you sort of, oh, I wish I could change this? In fact, what is very important, and I think that has been already said, was that
as far as we are concerned, the private sector, we are linked with the concession agreement with the grantor. And this concession agreement is not just, I give you the infrastructure and you do whatever you want. It's a big control of the public sector on us, but this control gives us a lot of constraints, it gives us a lot of willingness to work well and to perform well our job. But what is very important for us is that it's a long-term contract, 20, 30, and in case of Anna, it's a 50-year contract that we have. We need some stability in the regulation and some local legal approach that is not linked to the political decisions.
And this can be difficult for politicians, right? Or is it not, maybe?
In fact, it's not. But what's happening is that sometimes they are happy to try to change it in order to get some more demands on the private sector. But if you take some countries that I will not name and they are not part of this meeting here, where they decide to modify everything from day to the other one, you can be sure that the private sector will never come back to this country, because you came to a country based on the contract and the faith discussion with the government, and at one point of time he decides, I'm sorry, I changed my mind, I'm going to modify something in your concession agreement, which would kill your concession agreement. We were talking about IRRs, which would kill it, you would lose money. So the trust is not there anymore. It's all a matter of trust and dialogue with the public sector.
But you do think that there's a need for more socio-economic studies. Why?
Because what we have seen also in our expertise is that sometimes some projects are launched only for political reasons. Sometimes people, a mayor, for example, wants to create this link or this pool because he thinks it will be good for him to be re-elected, but he didn't look at it the way that, is it useful for the citizens that I am in charge of? Is it useful for the city, for the economics? And what has been clearly demonstrated is that all the projects that are economically viable are those that have been socially accepted.
So when looking at your system, do you think that can be combined with other measures to create a better use? Or is it only about congestion?
Well, it's primarily about congestion, but I think it can be combined with a lot of different technologies. And as I said, a lot of the data is coming in as an important part of that. But it primarily is about congestion, alleviating congestion, which also reduces pollution. And it's also about saving lives, because in many cases our solution is used on areas where they've maybe previously had used some other technology like cones to separate lanes on a bridge or some other method and had crossover fatalities. So this is another part of really getting to a safe solution in use of the existing infrastructure.
So thank you. Please take a seat. And now I would like to welcome the other speakers back on stage. So Mr. Salchow Montero and Mr. Jan-Bert and Mr. Scott Belcher. And we will open the floor now for questions from you in the audience. So hold up your hand if you have, yeah, we have a question already. And wait until you get a microphone. And then please state your name and the organization you're working for before your question. I think the first question is up here. Up here, this gentleman. Okay, we'll get to you later then. Yes, could you stand up and tell us who you are?
Hello, my name is Sophie Punte and I'm the Executive Director of the Smart Freight Center. I miss freight in your discussion and I would like just to ask general comment from you. How does the movement of goods fit in this picture of making better use of existing infrastructure? Because you've all primarily focused on passengers and we know that without integration of freight in this debate, we're not really solving the problem.
That's a good question, is it not? Would you like to answer, Mr. Salchow Montero? You were, oh, I have to get you the microphone, sorry.
I think I was the only one that mentioned freight, but the fact is, of course, when we discuss better use of existing infrastructure in terms of congestion, we tend to speak more about cities and its congestion and less about freight. Nevertheless, I think you are absolutely right. Freight is a relevant part of the picture because it decongests roads, because the reduction in the number of trucks, it's not urban, but it's peri-urban movement. But I think there the industry and the actors are closer together and it's easier because the number of players and decision makers is less relevant than the individual users of roads. So the fact that they are a bit more professional in the approach makes them more rational if the information is available and in real time makes them more rational in the decision-making process. That's why we knew for a fact, based on the debate and discussion we had with economic agents in Portugal, what they needed in order to increase freight in terms of rail and to remove part of the freight from road. Because I'm sure every country has the same experience. More than 80%, in our case more than 90% of the freight movement is still made by road, not by rail. So decongesting roads is part of the plan. That's why we are reducing the unitary cost of freight movement via rail, and it's really a relevant part of our infrastructure plan.
In Sweden, we began talking about using the sea more, because we have a lot of things going on the road that maybe doesn't need to go there.
Yeah, you are absolutely right, not only in cabotage, short sea, but also in terms of transshipment move or intercontinental move. We have a significant part of our exports also coming from and to our ports. Port sector in Portugal, that's the experience I have, has been extremely resilient throughout crisis, and it was inversely correlated with GDP. These 3 years, GDP has reduced and port movement has increased because we are now a more export-driven economy. So we are trying to get the freight from the country to the ports via rail, and then using the ports via sea to reduce congestion in terms of road. That's exactly part of the plan we have to better use of existing infrastructure.
So any one of you like to comment on the freight?
I think it's a good question. I can mention a nice example of public-private cooperation, the Lean and Green program we've got, and not only in the Netherlands. This program stimulates organizations voluntarily to reduce their CO2 with 20% within 5 years. The Ministry financed the program, but now it's financially independent. In the Netherlands, 300 companies are part of this network, and these efforts to reduce the CO2, that means you have to think in your company about the measures to take, immediately lead to cash euros. So it's good for the business. The program is now launched in Germany. 70 companies are involved now, and the aim is 1,000 companies. So that's a very practical way to stimulate the better use of infrastructure.
So freight in the United States is a very important issue. We realize that if we don't continue to improve our freight system, we're going to continue to lose our competitive position in the world, and that's very important. It's been important to our government, who's set aside money and a focus on a national freight plan. Technology can be incredibly beneficial to the movement of freight and goods. If you think about what telematics technology, which is a technology that allows you to, optimize routing, optimize loads, learn about your driver behavior. You can use crowdsourcing or gamification on top of that to have your drivers compete against each other in terms of eco-driving and get greater miles per gallon. You think about what you can do in terms of platooning connected vehicles to reduce congestion, to reduce, and then just one quick anecdote. One technology that we all use is electronic weigh stations and electronic credentialing. The largest electronic credentialer in the United States has 50 million green lights. So those are 50 million trucks that would normally stop and be weighed. They typically will stop for 15 to 20 minutes. They won't turn off their engines, and in that time they'll burn a half a gallon of diesel fuel. So they're saving, by instituting this technology, saving over 25 million gallons of diesel fuel and the associated emissions. So that's what technology can do for freight.
So I think we should take the next question. I think now you got a microphone.
Okay, thank you. I'm Thorsen from the International Federation of Pedestrians. And of course, one thing is that the infrastructure is used partly by vehicles or public transport and partly by the pedestrians. And also, when we have to cross the road, we have to share time and space. So it's a little strange that when we speak about better use of infrastructure, we are not in there in the debate. And that's what I'm here now. I think that a pedestrian trip could said to be economically one of the cheapest solutions. And I was strange that it
Depending on how long you have to travel to get to work, right?
That's maybe a time question, but to construct the infrastructure for a pedestrian trip, a normal one, is one of the most economic ways of doing. And think that if we lose just a pair of percent of the pedestrian transport or traffic, we will need much more space.
But now this makes me curious. I need to ask you, because you've been working with the program, how much have you thought about pedestrians and encouraging people to walk more?
Well, the program mainly focuses on the cities. In the Dutch cities, everywhere there are paths for pedestrians, so that's no problem as such. So it's not particularly a part of the program.
And people ride bikes a lot in Holland. It's not the same as walking, but it's...
Well, I think the people in the, for instance, city of Amsterdam who live nearby the station and go by train to their work and can walk to the station, they will walk. So, and on the other hand, if it is 5 or 6 kilometers, they probably get there by bike or public transport.
Do you have a reflection on the pedestrian situation, maybe?
Just to share a thought, more than a reflection. I think the approach we should have is how to bring people closer to the centers of the cities. And how we encourage them with the right incentives. We have, again, a problem in Portugal, which is people are in the suburbs, but not in the center. The center is relatively abandoned. So we launched a program that has put some oxygen in the construction sector in Portugal, which is the urban refurbishment, to bring, namely youth people, to the center of the cities, because it has a lot of impact. And we have reduced vehicle usage in the centers of the cities. So we have stopped, we put some cafes and so on. So small economic activity in the center of the city, together with this reduction in the impact of urban refurbishment, and we have been extremely successful. So we have passed to a 5 to 6% refurbishment versus 92 to 94% new construction, to now 20% and growing of refurbishment, and bringing youth people to the centers of the city. And by reducing vehicle usage just to public transportation and without an individual mode of transport in the largest cities in Portugal, we think we are getting on the right direction towards better use of the cities, and also the rights of pedestrians and bike users in our cities.
So I saw a lot of hands before. So where is the next one? Is that you, sir? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Erik Mark Huytema. I work for IBM. And Scott, IBM is a good employer, but after 9 times I will certainly lose my job. But okay. But we make good decisions and good innovation decisions. And one of the decisions we made was working together and sponsored even by the Department of Transport, where Jan-Bert is working for. And that was working with the city of Eindhoven on getting data out of the car and then sharing that with the government, with the city of Eindhoven. And my question to Scott is mainly, or the other people from the central government, and of course, Jan-Bert, you can answer as well, but the question is, are you anticipating to get data from the cars, which is very valuable data, and how are governments thinking of using that data in a more efficient way to make sure that the infrastructure is used in the best way? That's my question.
Well, I'll start, but I'm not a a government. I do think you're going to see more and more data coming from the cars and being utilized by government operators, and they're going to be utilized in multiple ways. I think the first thing is to stop thinking about data in silos and to start to think about data across the transportation system. And so if you think about that and you take the data that you're getting from vehicles, you can synchronize traffic signals and optimize the traffic flow. You can give priority to buses or to emergency vehicles. You can adjust speed limits based on weather because you're getting information about how the cars are braking, whether the windshield wipers are going. I mean, there's just an incredible amount of data that you can use and an incredible amount of data that you can use to squeeze more out of the system. And I think everybody on this panel is going to be in the business of squeezing more out of the system. And the only way you can do that, I mean, there is some smart construction, there's some smart things you can do, but at least in the urban centers, there's not a whole lot left you can do. And so that data is going to become incredibly, incredibly valuable. But those are some examples, but I defer to my
what do you say, Mr. Sergio Montero?
Yeah, I fully agree. Data needs to be real-time and relatively free. And that's the role of the public bodies. Otherwise, all private operators try to get the best out of their direct investment. Of course, I was positively surprised to hear Vinci say, well, they have a road, but they provide information about usage of metro or train and so on. It seems almost too good to be true, because they have the incentive for the road to be used. So in order to align all incentives, I think the role of the public bodies is to make sure that everybody receives free or relatively free the information that it got from public bodies. And then there is a whole lot that municipalities and local authorities can do with traffic in urban centers and so on. So we need to make sure that we all imbibe that. But I think our role is to make mainstream the use of this information. Otherwise, it will be captured by relevant stakeholders, but not for all public to be used.
Do you want to react to this too?
Just for the data, it's a very complicated issue. As you know, we are operating airports, highways, parkings, so we can collect a lot of data, but we also have regulations that do not allow us to use them like we should use them to improve either the benefit of the company or the movement of the people. But this is true what I was saying, Mr. Minister. We have it in Nantes, in a parking. We give them the option and they decide. It's not already put everywhere, but what is important for us, if someone is happy with the information he has, he will be more reliable and he will come back. And I think this is what we are here for. We are here to help people understand how to move within the city or within two cities. The data we collect is fully important. You imagine the number of data we collect, but we are really struggling today to see how we can use them in the right way, and this is where we are still thinking about it, how to use them without having people saying you are using private information to improve. Up to now, what we are using with them is to try to understand what people are doing, to try to say what is their need, what they would like to do. We didn't come up to a solution right now, but we are just studying those data and to see whether they can come up for something in which we still try to answer to the needs of the citizens when they are asking for a need.
Would you like to say something too? Otherwise, we go to the next question.
Yeah, okay. I think there's a lot of data available, and the government has data. Our policy is in principle to put this data open. We've got several projects around the data, for instance, open parking data, so the public parking garages as well as the private ones should open their data, put it in an open portal so all the services, everybody can put services on it. So as a customer, I can get information, where's a parking space, what do I have to pay, and make a reservation. And that's the way we look upon it.
Okay, so I think we're ready for the next question, and that's you, sir.
Thank you. Umberto De Preto, International Road Transport Union. Going back to the freight side, this morning we had a discussion on global supply chains, and of course we heard that supply chains are 24/7. So isn't it a bit of a paradox that we discuss better use of existing infrastructure when we have governments in the EU, and Scott, you might not believe this, but yeah, here in the EU, there are actually policies whereby we close down infrastructure to a certain user, that is freight, that is trucks, on weekends and nighttime. So how can you stop an economy, an economic activity, say, well, yes, the economy works 24/7, but you cannot use trucks on weekends or nighttime. Now, I know there's a reason for that. You have passenger cars that want to be able to roam free on the weekends. But if we're smart about it, why wouldn't we say, in working in public-private partnership, if I have the cleanest vehicle with the best trained drivers, then I do have access weekends and nighttime, while others don't. So you give a real business incentive for nothing to actually clean up the fleet and professionalize the services. That's on the freight side. On the passenger side, I heard very little about for what we at the RU would consider to be the no-brainer solution. The Dutch video showed that the biggest problem we have in terms of congestion are cars, of course. They represent 90% of the traffic. So how do we remove and incentivize people to get out of the car and into another mode? Well, the cheapest, the safest, and the cleanest mode that they can use are buses and coaches. So how do we actually introduce a system where people will get into buses and coaches? Of course, they can walk as well, but the cleanest and safest motorized means are buses and coaches. So how do we actually change public policy to make it so that it's easier for people to use buses and coaches, and to actually for the business as well, so that they do provide this service? Thank you.
Okay, so I didn't quite hear the question there, but maybe you have a reaction to what he's been saying.
Well, in terms of freight, you have a good point, a good solution, but I would say the other one is to change the mode at weekends. You can do it by sea, you can do it by rail instead of by truck. So, yeah, it's a policy, but it represents an incentive to, in some periods of time, and then to be a permanent way of changing your own habits. Of course, it's not a solution that will last or that will solve every problem. That's why I say your suggestion worth some thought, because it, again, aligns incentives. But there are other ways of solving the same problem. Regarding the second comment, there are a number of ways of trying to incentivize not to bring the car to the city center. But that comes at a cost. A monetary cost for users sometimes, and a political cost for decision makers at other times, namely local authorities. It's not even central planning in some of the cases that have the responsibility to think about charging for entering certain regions or part of the city center and so on. You can reserve more space for car parking, to make it cheaper in rush time, in order for you and to rebate and to have intermodal interactions with car parking to use metro when it is available, or bus, or any other means of public transport. This is, I would say, pretty common, and this is already done. We need to intensify, to massify, but the congestion problem typically is on pendular movement. It's not in city centers that you have problems. So you need to have a public transportation, namely rail, that goes a little bit beyond. But I need to make the reflection. We cannot solve all problems at the same time, unfortunately. So we need to prioritize based on each case congestion. And there are some pretty good solutions throughout the panel, namely the private parties. Increase the number of lanes to reduce congestion, or use a better use of information, optimizing, try to align incentives. All of this is part of the equation of reducing cars. I think this panel is the best way of showing that even though we as public bodies can decide upon prioritizing one or the other, there are multiple solutions that serve pretty much all needs.
So next question. I saw a hand before.
Hello,
Yes,
my name is Niels Busch Christensen, and I'm head of the Transport Research Institute at the Technical University of Denmark. Looking at the title of this session, I was kind of surprised not to hear anybody mentioning congestion pricing as a mean. Now everybody's talking about how technology is developing, and we're getting much more possibilities, and everything is approaching very fast. I think this also means that the potential for using a cost-effective road pricing system is also approaching. So when nobody has talked about road pricing or congestion pricing as a means to have an optimal use of the transport infrastructure, is that because everybody thinks that it is stone dead, politically, at least for the time being?
Yeah, is that the reason? Is it stone dead?
No, I think it's exactly the opposite. I think, at least from my perspective, it's alive and well. And you see it in a number of ways. You see it in the pricing that we use in tolling, existing tolling in the United States, especially in hot lanes, where we'll adjust the price to ensure and to guarantee a certain performance level. We see it more and more in parking, where we're adjusting parking to ensure a certain performance level and to make sure that you've got a parking space available, and it may be at a higher rate. And in fact, in some cities in the United States, we'll price different sides of the street differently. That's how granular it gets. And I think we're going to see road pricing. I think road pricing is clearly the future in paying for our road infrastructure system, at least at some point, because in the United States we don't at this point have the guts to raise the gas tax, and we underprice the price of fuel so ridiculously that that we're not incented at this point not to drive. But that's a short-term problem. I think in the long term, we've got to come up with a different solution, especially as we're moving to more fuel-efficient vehicles. And I think road pricing is really the solution. But it depends on how you describe it too. If we don't have the guts to raise the gas tax, is road pricing just another tax and a different way of doing it? And do we have the guts to do that? And I don't know, but we got to get the guts to do something, or it's a bad picture, at least in the United States.
Mr. Fadi Selvan?
I think we talked a little bit about the congestion and increasing the price. I talked about the experience we have in the US, the managing lanes, where the more people are on the existing road, the higher the rate is for the people that want to have the fastest way to go from point A to point B. And we also talked about the tolling system that is in London, for example, to enter into the city. But this is one solution, but we cannot say this is the solution, because you cannot say to anybody that wants to move from one way to another that he has to pay a high price. This is not fair. So you have to show him that he has other possibilities and other opportunities to move for this mobility. It would be rather, if I may say so, it would be just a middle or high class who would be able to afford this kind of toll, because they are very high tolls. And I think this is something we should push a lot. It's important to focus on this, on some specific projects, but at the same time, we need all of us, public and private sector, to present other opportunities, other way of moving. Otherwise, it will be biased, completely biased, and really unfair.
So, unfortunately, Minister McLaughlin, he had to leave us due to urgent business, but I do believe that he mentioned that a little bit in his speech, and maybe you would like to comment some more, Mr. Montero.
Yeah, we both did. Patrick started and I complemented with the yield management. When I mentioned yield management, exactly that, the congestion charge. You charge more when you have more occupancy. What's strange is that this habit did not start at the beginning. It's now pretty common. The public train company in Portugal, the train operator, charges a little bit more for tickets at last minute because the usage, so load factor has increased, as we expect to charge a little bit more in the highway in Algarve, that I hope everybody will visit this summer, in Algarve, when roads are a bit heavier than they are right now in spring. So it makes not only economic sense, but people are used to the offer-demand mechanism in the economy. So it's nothing that is imposed, it's nothing strange to the user being in freight or as individual. I think you are absolutely right, but also we need to make sure that as Fadi was saying, that information is there. Otherwise, people will perceive that we are trying to charge a little bit more regarding congestion, because we do not offer sufficient information for them to choose a different mode of transport.
One more question I think we have time for.
Thank you. My name is Edwin Bastiaanse. I'm with the International Motorcycle Manufacturers. I have a question. When we look at towards existing use of better infrastructure, when we look also at the urbanization trend and where we have also the cities, we have the most developed infrastructure. So we have the biggest problem of better using this infrastructure. You are addressing a number of solutions, a number of concepts, a number of projects. But of course, it takes a long time. So what do the consumers do? They make their own choice and they change their choice. They change their car for a motorcycle. And they start commuting using a motorcycle. What are you doing to support that? Thank you.
Yes.
It rests on me, okay. For instance, on our side, we have reduced cost in highway. The maximum, the cap in highway usage is reduced, and we allow for motorcycles to use the bus lane in cities. These are two very simple examples on changing from car to motorcycle with advantage in terms of time and cost.
We have no special attention for motorcycles in our program or in the policy on this point. But if you look at the figures in the Netherlands, till now 1 million electric bikes are sold. So in that market you see more growth than in the motorcycle market. It's more for free time, spare time, and not for or less for commuting.
Okay, our time is basically up, so I would just like to hear from every one of you, what do you think we should be on the lookout for when it comes to infrastructure in the future? What is the thing that we need to watch out for? And you, Richard Prod, you haven't said anything, so I would like you to start.
Well, I think one of the things to look for is in planning for the future. You know, we've seen some we've heard a lot of interesting things, and I've seen some innovative ideas in terms of what some cities are doing. We had a great example on the I-15 freeway in San Diego where they had 4 northbound lanes and 4 southbound lanes, and in the center 4 managed lanes, which basically could go any direction at any time. And they're basically using them for whether it's carpool lanes or bus lanes or whatever is needed. But I think it's really planning for the future, because not only is our infrastructure need to be used in terms of what we have today, but I think as we're building new, we need to think about building in flexibility.
Mr. Scott Belcher?
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess my question is, so what do we build? And that's a question my members ask on a regular basis. So if you start to think about a future where you have vehicles that don't crash or vehicles that drive themselves, what does that mean for your infrastructure? Do you need traffic signals? Do you need parking spaces? Do you need lane lines? Can the lanes be 4 feet narrower, so can you squeeze another lane into transportation? Those are tough questions, and the hard thing is for transportation operators, you need to be thinking about that, because your infrastructure lasts 75 or 100 years. And so the decisions we make today are decisions we're going to live with when our grandchildren are sitting in this audience and on this stage. And that's a tough question. And I think that's one of the most important things that we have to grapple with.
And what do you think, Mr. Montero?
Again, as I mentioned in my earlier speech, here, get as much information as possible and then decide. Understanding the trends means that you need to be ahead, and the likelihood of a government to be ahead of the trend without hearing and gathering information is relatively small. So don't be afraid to be humble when you are a government and hear every actor, relevant actor of the market prior to decide, because the likelihood of better decisions is incredibly higher.
So Mr. Jan-Bert Dijkstra, I think I'm pronouncing your name wrong the whole time, but I'm sorry about that.
I think it's, in the same way, you have to look for the smart traveler. the smart commuter, what is the demand? There are so many sort of commuters and travelers. What is the demand? And how can you supply that demand? And that's more an infrastructure. I think more in terms of services to the people, and that's a way of looking to the system. So the hardware and the software in combination.
And Mr. Fabi Selwan?
I think we have talked a lot. What I think is important, and unfortunately for us, is that the future is not only in the cars. It means that everybody is not going to go always in cars on tolled roads or tolled cities. In fact, we have to give information. The information is the most important part of all the congestions. Most part of the congestion comes from the fact that the people, when they start their travel, they don't know if they have another option, or they don't know where the option is and how it works. So the most important part is to share information and to split information between the different entities, like the train, the light rail, the metros, the buses, the pedestrians, if pedestrians are involved, etc. The most important way to improve it is to show information and to give them the way of modifying their movement within the cities or within the city or between cities. This is the best way to improve congestion.
So thank you all ministers, and thank you all other guests in the panel, and thank you all in here for coming. There will be a summary up on the ITF website later on, and there you can also later on find a video of this session in case you want to watch it again. So thank you very much.